Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John's report is for the 14th. And well, we got a couple of things to cover. I wasn't able to get my Friday upload up because I was on a plane and we were flying through electrical storms, so my internet connection was intermittent and shame coming off of our cyan candle. And it was interesting because, let me put up the 78-minute chart of the S&P because it was interesting. We gapped lower and purchase of that open was a beautiful construct as the day ended, was a very nice setup. From a pure win standpoint, not the case from the futures, but again, if you were still trading the 50K setup that we had, it made no difference. I mean, we had continued rising red, so even within the construct, we ended up with the red candles, retraced those lows and continued to make the higher move and continued on after that cyan candle came in right there. So no change from the 50K standpoint. But yes, I will record that as a negative from that aspect of it, at least, because it wasn't a positive finish. But even from trading a future or 78-minute chart, still would have worked out just fine. What I do want to do is take a look at the 5K, because that was an interesting construct from that point too, and worth taking a look at. So 5K standpoint here, we ended up with, started out with the short signal from the pink dot. We continued down. Now the open really didn't take place until all the way over here, is where we pick up the story, but we had the deep red. It continued lower, and then if we slide across, we can see how that eventually came across from the morning standpoint, and you can see this is how it actually turned out for much of Friday's action. Well, ending of Thursday going into Friday at least. So there it was. It was a slight improvement going forward. We ended up with a retest there on higher rising red pivots, and then it continued to be a little bit choppy going through for Friday's action. And so that sets us up with, as we saw there on the daily chart, another cyan candle. So, and that's where puts us, we take a look back at that daily real quick. And so, boom, another long settle. Now, in this case, still we've got a problem because, yes, we had the rising steel and it crossed over for our first one. We've got to see a tick up in the green here. Otherwise, we're still going to be facing some modest weakness within this configuration. The fact that we got over the plus 7.5 here with the cyan, a pivot lower on that, should result in positive movement. We could still see some early weakness in it before turning around, but this is still not great, at least from a DOC standpoint. Flipping over to the NQ, we can see similar construct here, nice rising with the steel, good improvement, never got into the red line here with the NQ at all, so it held up much better, though still much steeper angle on the decline setup right there. We just broke below the zero with the red, so the potential for a little bit of weakness within that one, yes, but following what we're seeing from the S&P or ES, looks okay. Let's look at the YM. So we look at the YM here, also rising with the extreme histogram and much deeper on the move there. It doesn't bode well with that, and particularly if the red takes out the low. But so you got to be cautious with it. It's just one that you're a little more careful, and you can follow those intraday signals, watching for the early buy signals and following that construct from there. But again, we can see the potential for weakness, but all we need is just a slight pivot up on the green, and particularly if I get a bonus pivot lower with the cyan, we can break out to the ultimate target here for the hawk signal that came in here with the green dot. That target was just about 1700 on there, so not out of reach. That's within possibilities. It's going to take a little bit. Let's look at from a TLT standpoint. No problems with that. In fact, moving into an even better buy configuration there. Almost about to take out this previous high with the red. That would bode for an even bigger continuation, maybe even coming up here towards reaching the highs. pretty stable from that look. Obviously, you've had some international news that's impacted things. Gold remaining strong because of that, and it was already strong here with the cyan well below the red line, and continuing rising with both red as well as green, maintaining its control over the top. A little bit of potential weakness with the move of the steel going lower, but overall that just means that you have opportunity to collect some weakness and take advantage of it. Looking at the euro, pretty much flat right in here. We had the nice increase from the buy signal that came in with the cyan candle, but has not reached that full target. And you're just now getting the cross of green going. So now we're going to be looking at will it continue? Will you be able to get the red moving above? Looks pretty good from that standpoint. So this could be a nice lower opportunity to jump in there. Definitely want to be following your intraday configurations within that one. Look at some of the basic ones. X had been in a strong configuration with the steel getting into the safety zone. At the same time, we had the cyan staying well below red, white, and it's just been a matter of looking for the pivots up, and every time you get the start of that configuration to get overbought within that last setup, but at the same time put in a nice orange dot with a new upside target 2870. So it's been a nice return for steel there. One that's still been in the sell signal was CLF, and that has not changed at all. We did get the first configuration cross there and an improvement. This is where I would begin to be looking for intraday signals on a turnaround, and that would be very attractive. Before we were talking about we had the breakout that came here, turned out gave us our what did they have it on snap mode? Let me remove that just by clicking that way I can move it independently. I would definitely be looking for anything above the white line coming back on returns for the ABM, or those are a little more aggressive. You look at that break of the green and first turn back above, worth an opportunity to play. At a very reasonable level. WLT was another nice one. We have the deep red that came through, and then we started to rise with it. So we ended up with this dip back down that was coming off of rising red above the previous pivot, as well as the green. Still recognizing that, not just super strong, but it was worth early play, and it worked out just fine. Well, let's go ahead and put up the alert charts here. We'll scroll through some of the numbers. Certainly still a lot of sells within there, but a lot of them have converted to a little bit of an improvement. So again, it's one of those where you literally have to look at the numbers of the individual ones, and that's going to become more and more the case here as we get rotation. So clearly, NASDAQ, a lot more sell signals within there, even though it's held up pretty well, I think. And the S&P, a little bit overweighted on the sell side, which indicates to me you're going to start looking for the potential turnaround. And the Dow, which is a little bit over the top, still very mixed. And I think that's, as you've heard, I think that's more healthy than not, and gives you the opportunity to take advantage of some of the discrepancies that exist. Apple's still been on my positive list, though. For the first time, we had the cyan move above green, still with red controlling, so still positive from there, and the deep safety zone there. Now we just had what would be a spider develop where the green popped above, so look for continuation from that standpoint. Flip over to Amazon, had turned around with the first pickup right down here. We were looking at the rising extreme histogram, thought it looked very attractive, hanging on these ABM levels, and boy, nice move. Did get it overbought there, but definitely worth looking at some of these when they start to present those oversold, particularly right around the ABMs, and you're deep down into these levels again. Likewise, though, with Baidu, still a little weakness we need to see now that green turn up for Monday, but you did get the dip from the red line and then the pop immediately above. This particular point, get a little bit of that improvement, might hold up. Still going to need to see a turnaround in red and obviously a fading of the cyan. That hasn't happened. We did get a lower cyan pivot, so the potential for a little bit of a continuation from there. Not bad. And moving on to the FAS. Started its early turnaround with these moves, but again, once you get that crossover, I usually count to that 3, and if we haven't turned around and gotten over that, could pose some difficulties. That would be a stumbling block for improvement on the market, and I would be watching my ES50K at that particular point to be a little bit more cautious about locking in at least a break even with where it is from its current config. Facebook putting in a negative right in that read just as it's about to cross over. You get a slight fade there, and I would look for that to sell off pretty significantly. Google also, so this all had the same configuration where they got oversold right around the ABM. Always helpful to be able to trade when it moves below that and comes back above, and you can just take it from there. So helpful to have that. And I am working on having that configuration where it will notify you when you get a break of these zone levels and a turn back to them. And that would be helpful from an alert standpoint, that you would then be able to have it change as a candle so you'd be able to come back to it. And again, got to see the green pivot up there, still well below the red line on Netflix. That's not the greatest signal for that one. PCLN still within that cell that turned out over here. Not bad. It hasn't dipped below the red line. I would be watching around that green and that and see if it can break down below and get completely oversold in it. Got to see a turn back though of the science making higher. It's going to be a higher pivot, so I would expect to potentially see a little bit lower from it yet. It's been pretty strong though, holding up, not dipping below the red line at this particular point. Tesla, another good one, has been in the sell for quite some time. You know, you had your cross, but no chance of moving over it within that time frame. You did make a lower pivot, so maybe we see a little turnaround, but now we're in deep red, and so you're going to see a pretty strong move to get above that green right there. It'd be my first check on the DOC from an open standpoint. So potential for a little more weakness, and again, we know down here is the full retrace of positive extremes. May not be done on its way there yet. And from a Twitter standpoint, it had its cross, not going to get there either. So it's probably just going to be a little pop before it has to come back, retest those lows. And that one should be more attractive because by then we should have a turn in the red as well as the green moving up clearly above it. And that would be the support that we're looking for. So all in all, it was an interesting setup. Definitely worth playing those cyan candles still. It was nice from the S&P standpoint to be able to trade the option on that with the open and the way it's set up and that. But from a futures, you definitely had to look at that 5K and see how that was developing pre-market. But it was still a buy, and hopefully, I know a couple people took advantage of it, but definitely worthwhile. It was a nice turnaround. It just was slow in developing, but when it got going, it was overall pretty nice. So, and this is kind of what we expected post 4th of July, that we were going to have a little bit more of this weakness bouncing back and forth. We knew we had a little bit of positive extreme stuff to play with on the daily, and not surprising. I mean, everything overall, it's strange that we would get the nice real strong move at a point where I couldn't communicate effectively. Being in the air, it was just nothing you can do when you're in the middle of those summer lightning storms here in Europe. That's one of those things. As always, though, I will be more active on the private Twitter feed and that coming into the start of the week, and I should have those adjustments that I was planning for the input values here, as well as some of the others on the buy sells that I've been talking to members with the indicators about, and just start to tighten up some of these things, make it easy to get just the indications that you want to come through on alerts, and that always makes it nice to have that kind of added insight. Just makes it easier to find the different configurations that are turning, because as you can see, a lot of these require individual attention if you're looking at these specific stocks individually, because there's just a lot of individual alterations, I think, when it comes to profit taking in some of these situations and or repositioning for funds in that. So we'll continue to look for more of the same there. It doesn't look frightening. I mean, obviously, world conditions are what they are, and that fear always makes for good opportunities if you're playing the readings as they come through. So keep doing that, and everything will be fantastic. So as always, we'll talk again tomorrow. Trade well.